I watched my husband, Blake, jamming his key into the front door lock, his face twisting from confusion to pure, unadulterated panic. He didn't know that the key was perfectly functional yesterday. He didn't know that 40 minutes ago I had signed the final closing documents and handed the keys to a cash investor. He thought he was coming home to a subservient wife. Instead, he was breaking and entering into a stranger's property. I took a slow breath, hidden behind the neighbor's curtains, and waited for the police to arrive. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. I never thought I would be the type of woman who checked pockets. It felt cliché, something from a bad daytime movie where the wife is shrill and paranoid and the husband is just misunderstood. But standing there in the laundry room with the scent of lavender detergent heavy in the air and the hum of the dryer vibrating through the floorboards, I couldn't stop myself. Blake had been different lately. Not bad different, just polished. He had started going to the gym at 5 in the morning, leaving the bed cold before the sun was even up. He bought cologne that cost more than our weekly grocery budget, a spicy, woody scent that replaced the drugstore brand he had worn since college. And his phone. God, his phone. It had become a physical extension of his hand, always face down on the table, always sliding into his pocket the second I entered the room. I told myself I was crazy. I told myself he was just trying to improve himself, that 40 was approaching and he was having a midlife crisis that involved bench presses and expensive moisturizers. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that because the alternative was that the last 14 years of my life were a lie. I reached into the pocket of his navy blazer, the one he wore for client meetings. My fingers brushed against a crumpled piece of paper. My heart did a stupid, fluttery thing in my chest, a mix of guilt and terror. I pulled it out. It wasn't a hotel receipt. It wasn't a jewelry store invoice. It was a thermal slip from a place called Loctite Storage. I stared at the paper. The ink was fading slightly, but the details were clear. It showed a monthly recurring charge of $180 for Unit 4B. The date was from 3 days ago. My brain tried to process this. We had a garage. We had an attic. We had a basement that was half empty because I had spent the last month decluttering. Why on earth would Blake need a storage unit? And why hadn't he mentioned it? I felt a wave of nausea roll through me. I thought about asking him. I imagined the conversation. I would hold up the receipt and he would laugh. He would say it was for his old college textbooks, or maybe he was storing Christmas presents early. He would make me feel small for asking, for doubting him. He would look at me with those eyes that used to look at me with adoration, but now just looked through me, like I was a smudge on a window pane. I didn't want to feel small. I didn't want to be the nagging wife. I put the receipt back in his pocket. Then I took it out again. I smoothed the paper on top of the washing machine. $180 a month. That was a lot of money for old textbooks. That was a climate-controlled price. I looked at the address. It was on the other side of town near the industrial park where his office was. I wasn't going to ask him. I was going to look. The drive to the storage facility was a blur of traffic and internal bargaining. I had the radio off. I needed the silence to organize the noise in my head. I convinced myself by the third stoplight that this was a surprise. Our 15th wedding anniversary was coming up in 2 months. Maybe he bought that vintage motorcycle he had always talked about restoring. Maybe he was building something. Blake was handy when he wanted to be. He had built the deck in our backyard 3 summers ago, shirtless and sweating, and I remembered bringing him lemonade and thinking how lucky I was. That memory hurt now. It felt like looking at a photograph of a dead person. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. If this was a surprise gift, I was ruining it. I was being the suspicious, untrusting wife who couldn't let her husband have a secret hobby. I felt a flush of shame creep up my neck. I should turn around. I should go to the grocery store, buy the ingredients for his favorite lasagna, and go home. But I kept driving. There was a voice in the back of my head, a cold, quiet voice that sounded nothing like me. It said that people don't hide motorcycles in climate-controlled units on the other side of town. It said that people don't guard their phones because they are looking up motorcycle parts. I pulled up to the gate of Loctite storage. It was a fortress of beige concrete and orange metal doors, surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. It didn't look like a place for hobbies. It looked like a place for secrets. I sat in my car for a long time, just watching the gate. A guy in a pickup truck drove out, the gate sliding open with a mechanical groan. I had a choice right now. I could leave. I could go back to the illusion. I could pretend the receipt was just trash and go back to being Natalie, the supportive wife who didn't ask questions. I looked at the dashboard clock. It was 2 p.m. Tyler was at school. Blake was at work. I had 2 hours before I had to be back in the role of mom. I turned off the ignition. The silence in the car was heavy. I grabbed my purse. My hands were shaking. I told myself to stop it. I told myself I was just checking, just verifying. If it was a motorcycle, I would leave immediately. I would never mention it. I would be surprised when he revealed it. I would be the best actress in the world. But if it wasn't a motorcycle, I didn't finish that thought. I couldn't. The office smelled like stale coffee and floor wax. There was a teenager behind the counter wearing a polo shirt that was 2 sizes too big for him. He didn't look up from his phone when the door chimed. I put on my best smile, the smile I used at PTA meetings and charity fundraisers, the smile that said I was harmless and friendly and definitely not a woman on the verge of a nervous breakdown. I told him I was Mrs. Hartley, and I had left my key card in my husband's car, and he needed me to drop off some files in Unit 4B right now because he was leaving for a business trip. I made it sound boring. I made it sound like a chore. The kid barely blinked. He asked for my ID. I gave it to him. The last name matched the rental agreement. He didn't even ask for the unit key. He just buzzed me through the pedestrian gate and told me the code for the main building. Security at these places was a joke, or maybe I was just a really good liar. I walked down the long, fluorescent-lit hallway. The air was cool and dry. My footsteps echoed on the concrete floor. 1A, 1B, 2A. I counted the numbers. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I felt like an intruder. I felt like a criminal. I found Unit 4B. It had a red door. A standard roll-up metal door, but there was a heavy padlock on the latch. I stopped. I hadn't thought this through. I didn't have a key. I stood there, staring at the brass lock, feeling foolish. Of course I couldn't get in. I was an idiot. I had driven all this way to stare at a piece of metal. Then I saw it. The latch wasn't fully engaged. The lock was hanging on the hasp, but the hasp itself wasn't pushed all the way in. It looked locked, but it wasn't secured. Blake must have been in a rush the last time he was here. I looked up at the hallway camera. It was pointed at the elevator, not down this corridor. I reached out and pulled the lock. It came free. I took a deep breath. I lifted the heavy metal door. It slid up on grease tracks with a rumble that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet hallway. I expected boxes. I expected a motorcycle. I expected dust. I didn't expect a living room. I froze. My brain refused to comprehend what I was seeing. The unit was set up like a studio apartment. There was a rug on the concrete floor, a Persian rug that looked suspiciously like the one Blake's mother had given us for our wedding, the one he said had been ruined by a water leak in the basement 3 years ago. There was a leather loveseat, a coffee table, a floor lamp casting a warm glow because it was plugged into the overhead socket with an adapter, and photos, dozens of them, taped to the metal walls framed on the table, photos of Blake and a woman. She was young. She had long, dark hair and the kind of smile that showed all her teeth. In one photo, they were on a boat. In another, they were at a concert. In another, they were lying in bed. This bed, the love seat pulled out into a sleeper, laughing. I walked into the room. My legs felt like they were made of wood. I felt detached, like I was floating above my own body. I picked up a framed photo from the table. It was Blake and this woman, holding up champagne glasses. She was wearing a necklace, a sapphire pendant. I touched my throat. I remembered that necklace. I had seen the charge on our credit card statement 2 Christmases ago, $600. Blake had told me it was a mistake, fraud, that the bank was handling it. I never saw the credit back, but I stopped asking because life got busy. He had bought it for her 2 years ago. This wasn't a fling. This wasn't a mistake. This was a second life. I sat down on the leather love seat. It smelled like him. It smelled like that expensive new cologne. I looked around the room. There was a small bookshelf in the corner. On it sat a stack of magazines, a bottle of wine, and an iPad. I recognized the iPad. It was an old model, one we had lost during our move 4 years ago. Or so I thought. I pressed the home button. No passcode. Blake never put passcodes on the family devices because he claimed he couldn't remember them. He relied on the fact that I respected his privacy. He relied on the fact that I was stupid. I opened the Photos app first. It was a timeline of betrayal. The earliest photo was dated 26 months ago, a selfie of the two of them in an elevator. She was kissing his cheek. He was grinning. I scrolled. Weekends when he was at a conference. Evenings when he was working late. The timestamps mocked me. Then I opened the Notes app. There was a folder labeled Us. I clicked it. It wasn't a list. It was a manifesto. It was a collection of drafted emails, love letters, and plans. I started reading. I forced myself to read every word. My wife is suspicious again, one note read. She kept asking about the mileage on the car. She's so suffocating. I just want to be here with you. Suffocating. I thought about the times I had made him soup when he was sick. The times I had handled all the bills, the house repairs, the parenting, so he could focus on his career. I thought I was being supportive. He thought I was suffocating. I read another note, dated from last month. Don't worry about the money, babe. I'm moving funds around. She doesn't check the investment accounts. We'll have enough for the trip. The trip. I remembered he had mentioned a fishing trip with the guys coming up. A 2-week excursion to Canada. I kept reading. My parents love you, he wrote to her. Mom said you're the daughter she never had. She thinks Natalie is too uptight. The air left my lungs. His parents knew. My in-laws, Richard and Susan, the people I invited to Thanksgiving every year, the people whose birthdays I remembered when Blake forgot, the people who criticized my cooking and my parenting, but whom I still treated with respect because they were family. They knew, and they preferred her. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It was hot and angry. I saw a shared calendar sync to the iPad. I clicked on next week. Lake House with Chloe and the Monroes. Chloe, that was her name. And the Monroes must be her parents. He wasn't going fishing. He was going on a family vacation with his mistress and her parents. He was playing house. He was playing husband to another woman in front of an audience that applauded him. I put the iPad down. My hands were trembling so badly I thought I might drop it. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the wine bottle against the wall. I sat there in the silence of that stolen room, surrounded by the artifacts of my husband's happiness, and I felt something inside me snap. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet, structural failure of a bridge that had been bearing too much weight for too long. I don't remember leaving the unit. I remember closing the red door and sliding the lock back onto the hasp, leaving it exactly as I found it. I remember walking down the hallway, the fluorescent lights buzzing like angry insects. I stumbled out into the parking lot. The sun was too bright. It hurt my eyes. I leaned against the side of my car, gasping for air. I felt like I was going to throw up. "You look like you saw a ghost, honey." I jumped. I spun around to see a silver station wagon parked 2 spots down. The window was rolled down and an older woman was watching me. It was Mrs. Gable, my neighbor. She lived 3 houses down. She was a widow, notorious in the neighborhood for yelling at kids who rode their bikes on her lawn and for measuring the grass height of the HOA common areas. We had barely spoken in 5 years. other than a polite wave when getting the mail. "Mrs. Gable," I managed to choke out. "What are you doing here?" She took a drag from a cigarette, something I didn't know she did, and exhaled a plume of smoke toward the storage units. "Same thing as you, I imagine," she said. Her voice was scratchy, like dry leaves. "Checking on the inventory." She nodded toward the building I had just exited. "I saw you go in," she said. "You were in there a long time. Unit 4B, right?" My blood ran cold. "How did you know?" Mrs. Gable smirked. It wasn't a mean smirk. It was a tired, knowing expression. "I rent Unit 4C, she said. "I keep my husband's old tools in there. I'm there every Tuesday to organize." "I've seen your Blake." She said his name with a distaste that I appreciated. "I've seen him with the girl," she continued. "Little brunette thing. Looks high maintenance." She had seen them. My neighbor had seen my husband cheating on me and hadn't said a word. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. My voice broke. "We live on the same street." Mrs. Gable sighed. She opened her car door and stepped out. She was wearing a floral house dress and orthopedic sneakers. She walked over to me and put a hand on my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Because people shoot the messenger, Natalie," she said. "If I told you, you would have hated me. You would have denied it. You had to see it for yourself." She looked at my tear-stained face. "But now you've seen it," she said. "So the question is, what are you going to do? Are you going to go home and cry, or are you going to do something about it?" "I don't know," I whispered. "I don't know what to do." "Well, Mrs. Gable said, looking at the storage facility with narrowed eyes. "I know the manager here. He drinks. He talks. I know your husband signed a year lease on that unit. I know he put you down as the emergency contact, which is just lazy." She looked back at me. "And I know a good divorce lawyer," she added. "Shark. Eats men like him for breakfast. But first, you need to wipe your face. You can't let him see you like this. If he knows you know, he'll hide the money." Hide the money. The phrase woke me up. He was already hiding money. The note said so. "He's going on a trip next week," I said. The words tasted like ash. "With her." Mrs. Gable nodded. "Good. That gives you time. You get in the car, you go home, and you act like everything is peaches and cream. You cook him dinner. You ask about his day, and you let him think he's the smartest man in the room." She reached into her purse and pulled out a tissue. She handed it to me. "Don't let the bastard win, Natalie," she said. I took the tissue. I wiped my eyes. I looked at this grumpy old woman who measured grass height, and I saw a rage in her eyes that matched my own. "I won't," I said. I made spaghetti for dinner. It was his favorite. I stood at the stove stirring the sauce, watching the red bubbles pop and splatter against the white enamel. I felt a strange sense of calm. It was the calm of the eye of the storm. Blake came home at 6:30. I heard the garage door open. I heard his heavy footsteps in the hallway. Usually my heart would lift a little when he came home. Tonight it felt like a stone. He walked into the kitchen. He was wearing that navy blazer, the one with the receipt in the pocket. "Hey, babe," he said. He kissed my cheek. I didn't flinch. I didn't pull away. I leaned into it. "Hey," I said. "How was work?" "Exhausting," he sighed, loosening his tie. "Clients all day. My throat is sore from talking." "Liar." "I'm sorry," I said. "Dinner is almost ready." "Why don't you go change?" He smiled. It was a practiced smile. "You're the best." He went upstairs. I listened to him moving around in our bedroom. Our bedroom. The room where I had nursed him through the flu. The room where we had conceived Tyler. I thought about the room in the storage unit, the love seat, the photos. I wanted to run upstairs and scream at him. I wanted to scratch his face. I wanted to burn the house down with both of us inside. But Mrs. Gable's voice was in my head. If he knows you know, he'll hide the money. I wasn't going to scream. I was going to be smart. He came back down in his sweatpants. We sat at the table. Tyler was talking about dinosaurs, his current obsession. Blake nodded along, pretending to listen, but I saw his eyes drift to his phone, which was face down next to his plate. "So," I said, twirling pasta on my fork, "are you excited about your fishing trip?" Blake looked up. A flash of panic crossed his eyes, then it was gone. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, really excited. It'll be good to disconnect. Just guys being guys. No cell service, probably." "That sounds nice," I said. "You deserve a break." "I do," he agreed. "I've been working so hard." He took a bite of garlic bread. He looked comfortable. He looked safe. He thought he had me fooled completely. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the gray in his beard that he was trying to hide. I saw the selfishness in the set of his mouth. I saw a stranger. And in that moment, the love I had held for him for 14 years didn't just die. It evaporated. It was replaced by something cold and hard and sharp. I didn't want to fix this marriage. I didn't want counseling. I didn't want an apology. I wanted him to hurt. I wanted him to feel the ground fall out from under him. I wanted to take everything. I finished my dinner. I cleared the table. I washed the dishes. When Blake went into the living room to watch the game, I went into the home office. I closed the door. I opened my laptop. I didn't search for marriage counseling. I searched for Patricia Wells' divorce attorney. Mrs. Gable had texted me the name while I was driving home. I found her website. It was black and white, severe. "Aggressively protecting your assets," the banner read. I clicked the contact button. I typed a message. I didn't cry while I typed it. My fingers flew across the keys. "My husband is having an affair. He is leaving for a 2-week trip with his mistress next Friday. I want to file for divorce, but more than that, I want to liquidate everything before he gets back. Can you help me?" I hit send. I sat back in the chair. I could hear the TV cheering in the other room. Blake was laughing at a commercial. "Laugh while you can, Blake," I thought. The waiting room of Patricia Wells's law office was designed to make you feel poor. The carpet was thick enough to swallow my heels. The walls were lined with mahogany that probably cost more than my first car, and the silence was absolute. I sat on a velvet chair, clutching my purse like a shield. I had researched Patricia. They called her the Barracuda in the local papers. She wasn't a mediator, she was a weapon. A receptionist with perfect bone structure called my name. I stood up, my legs feeling shaky. I was about to cross a line I could never uncross. Patricia Wells did not look like a shark. She looked like a grandmother who baked cookies, round and soft with reading glasses perched on a silver chain. But then she looked at me, and I saw her eyes. They were hard, assessing, and completely devoid of warmth. She didn't offer me coffee. She pointed to the leather chair opposite her desk. I sat. I had rehearsed this speech a dozen times in the shower. I wanted to sound strong. I wanted to sound sure. "My husband is cheating," I started, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. "I found a storage unit. I have proof." Patricia didn't blink. She opened a yellow legal pad and picked up a pen. "Details," she said. Her voice was like gravel. I told her everything. The unit, the photos, the receipts, the upcoming trip with the mistress and her parents. When I finished, Patricia set her pen down. She looked at me for a long moment. "Do you want a divorce, Mrs. Hartley?" she asked. "Or do you want a reckoning?" The question hung in the air. A divorce meant splitting assets. It meant 50-50 custody. It meant Blake got to keep half of the life I built while he was off playing house with Chloe. I thought about the red door of the storage unit. I thought about the way he looked at me at dinner, like I was an appliance he was tired of using. "I want him to have nothing," I whispered. Patricia smiled. It was a terrifying expression. "Good," she said. Because in this state, adultery affects alimony, but it rarely affects asset division unless we can prove dissipation of marital funds. "You said he spent money on her?" "Jewelry," I said. "Trips, the storage unit." "We will find it all," Patricia said. "But if you want to hurt him, really hurt him, We need leverage. We need to hit him where his ego lives, his house, his image, his wallet. She leaned forward. "Here's the retainer fee," she said, sliding a piece of paper across the desk. "It is non-negotiable. If you sign this, I own your problems. But you have to do exactly what I say. No deviations, no mercy." I looked at the number. $5,000. It was a lot of money. It was money I had been saving for a new car. I picked up the pen. I didn't hesitate. I signed my name. We spent the next hour dissecting my financial life. Patricia was surgical. She wanted tax returns, bank statements, deed copies. I had brought everything I could find in a cardboard box I had smuggled out of the house while Blake was at the gym. She was riffling through a folder of old bank documents when she stopped. Her finger tapped against a faded statement from 6 years ago. "Tell me about this deposit," she said. I leaned in to look. It was a transfer for $212,000. "That was my inheritance," I said, "from my grandmother. She left me her house in Ohio and I sold it." "And what did you do with the money?" Patricia asked. Her eyes locked on mine. "I used it for the down payment on our house," I said, "and we paid off the renovations, the kitchen, the new roof." Patricia flipped to the deed of our current house. She scanned the lines of text. "Blake is on the deed," she muttered. "That usually makes it marital property." My stomach sank. I knew it. He would get half the house. "But," Patricia said, raising a finger, "you have a paper trail. You can prove the source of funds was pre-marital inheritance. And more importantly, you have grounds for an at-fault divorce based on adultery." She sat back, a look of calculation on her face. "Here is what we are going to do," she said. "We are going to file an emergency ex parte motion. We are going to claim that he has abandoned the marital home and is dissipating assets to fund an extramarital affair. We will ask the judge for temporary exclusive possession of the residence." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," Patricia said, "that if the judge signs it, you have the legal right to change the locks. You have the right to control the property. And if we argue that the equity in the house belongs primarily to you because of the inheritance, we might just be able to get an order allowing you to liquidate the asset to preserve the funds before he wastes them." "Sell the house?" I asked. "Without him knowing?" "It is aggressive," Patricia admitted. "It requires a judge who hates cheaters." Luckily, Judge Morrison is presiding next week. His first wife ran off with his tennis instructor. He is sympathetic to our cause. She looked at the calendar on her desk. "He leaves for his trip on Friday?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "That gives us 10 days, Patricia said. "We file the motion the minute his plane takes off. If the judge signs it on Monday, you have 4 days to sell the house before he gets back. Can you empty a 4-bedroom house in 4 days?" I thought about the years of clutter, the memories, the furniture we had picked out together. I thought about Chloe wearing my necklace. "I can do it," I said. The house felt like a stage set when I got home. Every interaction with Blake was a performance. I was playing the role of the oblivious, supportive wife, and I deserved an Oscar. Wednesday night, Blake decided to start packing for his Friday departure. He hauled his suitcase onto our bed, the bed he shared with me every night while texting her, and started folding shirts. I stood in the doorway watching him. "Do you have enough warm socks?" I asked. My voice sounded sickeningly sweet in my own ears. "It gets cold on the lake at night." He didn't look up. "Yeah, I think so." I packed the wool ones. I walked over to the dresser and pulled out a stack of sweaters. "Here, take the navy one," I said. "It brings out your eyes." I handed him the sweater. He took it, his fingers brushing mine. I felt a jolt of repulsion so strong I almost gagged. "Thanks, babe," he said. "You're the best." I watched him pack it. I wondered if Chloe liked that sweater. I wondered if she would be wearing it around the campfire while her parents toasted their happiness. "I need to make sure you have everything," I said, moving to the bathroom. I started rummaging through the medicine cabinet. I found the sunscreen, the bug spray, the first aid kit. I brought them out and arranged them on the bed. Make sure you use the high SPF, I said. You burn so easily. I was mothering him. I was taking care of him so he could go cheat on me comfortably. It was a special kind of torture, but I needed him to feel safe. I needed him to have zero suspicions. Oh, Blake said, pausing with a pair of jeans in his hand. I might lose cell service for a few days. The cabin is pretty remote, so if you can't reach me, don't worry. I forced a smile. That is fine, I said. You need to unplug. Just relax. Inside, I was screaming. He wasn't going to be remote. He was going to be ignoring me. I grabbed his toiletry bag. I checked the zipper. Do you have your razor? I asked. Got it, he said. I looked at the bag. I wanted to put something in there, a note, a picture of us, something to haunt him. But I stopped myself. No clues. I zipped the bag shut. You are all set, I said. Blake looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in weeks. There was a flicker of guilt in his eyes, but it was weak. It was quickly drowned out by his anticipation. I'm going to miss you, he lied. I'm going to miss you too, I lied back. And I meant it. I was going to miss the version of him that didn't exist anymore. The man standing in front of me was already a ghost. Thursday afternoon, I met Gavin, the private investigator Mrs. Gable had recommended, in the back booth of a diner 3 towns over. I didn't want to risk running into anyone we knew. Gavin was a small man with nervous hands and eyes that darted everywhere. He slid a manila envelope across the sticky table. You were right, he said quietly, about everything. I opened the envelope. I didn't pull the photos out. I just peeked inside. There was a copy of a reservation confirmation. It wasn't for a fishing cabin in Canada. It was for a luxury lodge at Lake Winnipesaukee. The guest list was typed clearly: Blake Hartley, Chloe Monroe, Robert Monroe, Janice Monroe. Seeing the names in black and white hit me harder than the photos in the storage unit. It was the legitimacy of it. They were a family unit. Blake was the son-in-law. I was the inconvenience. I spoke to a source at the lodge, Gavin said. He took a sip of his coffee. Special request for a birthday cake. For Janice Monroe. The note on the order says, "Can't wait to celebrate with the best mother-in-law." Signed Blake. I felt the blood drain from my face. He called her his mother-in-law. He hasn't even filed for divorce yet, and he's already replaced my family, I whispered. Gavin looked uncomfortable. He tapped the envelope. There is more, he said. I ran a background check on the Monroes. They aren't wealthy. In fact, they have quite a bit of debt. But suddenly, last month, they paid off a credit card bill for $12,000. I looked up sharply. $12,000. I remembered a withdrawal from our savings account 6 weeks ago. Blake had told me it was a capital call for an investment property his firm was managing. I had signed the transfer without looking at the details because I trusted him. He paid their debt, I said. He's funding them. Gavin nodded. It looks that way. He's buying their approval. My hands clenched into fists under the table. He was stealing from our future, from Tyler's college fund, to pay off the debts of his mistress's parents so they would like him. It was pathetic. It was evil. Keep watching him, I told Gavin. I want pictures of him at that lake house. I want pictures of him with her parents. I want everything. Gavin nodded. It will cost extra for the travel time. I don't care, I said. I pulled out my checkbook. I wrote him a check for another $2,000. I handed it to him. Nail him to the wall, I said. Friday morning, the day of departure. Blake was in the shower. I had 1 hour before he left for work from where he would head straight to his trip. I needed to move the rest of the liquid cash. Patricia had told me to open a new account at a different bank, one solely in my name, and transfer half the joint savings. It was legal, she said. It was marital funds, and until a judge said otherwise, I had as much right to them as he did. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. My coffee had gone cold. I logged into our joint bank account. The balance stared back at me. $42,000. It was our emergency fund. I clicked transfer. I entered the routing number for my new account. I typed in $21,000. I hit submit. The screen spun for a second. Then a red box appeared. Transaction declined. Please contact the fraud department immediately. Panic spiked in my chest. No, 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 no. I checked my email. An automated alert had just arrived. Suspicious activity detected. Account frozen. They would call Blake. His number was the primary one on the account. If his phone rang right now while he was in the shower, he would see the fraud alert. He would see I was trying to drain the account. I looked at the ceiling. The water was still running. I grabbed my phone. I dialed the bank's customer service number. "We are experiencing higher than normal call volume," the automated voice chirped. "Your estimated wait time is 15 minutes. I didn't have 15 minutes. He would be out in 10. I hung up. I grabbed my keys. I ran to the bottom of the stairs and yelled up, "Blake, I forgot to get milk for Tyler. I'm running to the store. Quickly." "Okay," he yelled back over the water. I sprinted to the car. The bank branch was 6 minutes away. I drove like a maniac, running a yellow light that was definitely turning red. I skidded into the bank parking lot. I ran inside. There was a line. Of course there was a line. I stood behind a man who was counting pennies. Literally counting pennies onto the counter. I wanted to scream. I tapped my foot. I checked my watch. 7:20. Blake would be out of the shower. He would be getting dressed. If the bank called him now... Finally, the man moved. I rushed to the teller. "I need to override a fraud freeze," I said, breathless. I shoved my debit card and ID at her. "Please, it's an emergency." The teller, a young woman named Sarah, moved in slow motion. She typed. She looked at the screen. She frowned. "It looks like a large transfer was attempted," she said. "The system flagged it because it's a new external account." "Yes, I know," I said. It's for a surprise party, a big one, for my husband. I need to pay the vendor today." The lie tasted like bile. "I see," she said. "I need to send a verification code to the phone number on file." "No," I said too loudly. People turned to look. I lowered my voice. "The surprise. If you text his phone, he'll see it. It will ruin everything." "Please, I'm right here. I have my ID. I have the PIN." Sarah looked doubtful. "Policy requires 2-factor authentication for transfers over $10,000. I felt tears pricking my eyes. This was it. I was going to fail because of bank policy. "Please," I whispered. We've had a really hard year. I just want to do something nice for him. Please don't ruin the surprise." I used the pain in my voice. I let her see the desperation, even if she misinterpreted the source. Sarah softened. She looked around. "Okay," she said. "I can ask my manager to do a verbal override since you're here in person with ID, but it might take a minute." "Do it," I said, "please." She walked away. I watched the clock on the wall. The second hand ticked mockingly. 7:28. He would be dressed. He would be checking his phone. If the bank had already sent an automated text, I was dead. Sarah came back with a bald man in a cheap suit. He looked at my ID. He looked at me. "Mrs. Hartley?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Happy birthday to your husband," he said, typing something on the keyboard. "The freeze is lifted. The transfer should go through now." "Thank you," I gasped. "Thank you so much." I ran out of the bank. I checked my phone. No calls from Blake. I drove home. I pulled into the driveway just as the garage door opened. Blake's SUV backed out. He rolled down the window as I pulled up alongside him. "Hey," he said, "you barely made it back. I'm heading out." I looked at his face. He was smiling. He hadn't seen a fraud alert, or maybe the bank hadn't sent one yet. "Drive safe," I said. My heart was hammering so hard I thought he could hear it. "Will do," he said. "Love you." "Love you," I said. He drove away. I watched his taillights disappear down the street. I sat in my car for a full minute, just breathing. I checked my banking app. Balance. $21,000. The transfer had cleared. I had the money. I walked back into the house. It was silent. The silence of a home that knows it is about to be dismantled. I stood in the hallway. Blake's gym bag was gone. His shoes were gone from the mat. The house felt lighter, emptier. He was gone. He was on his way to Pickens County to pick up Chloe. Then they would drive 3 hours to the lake. I had 6 hours before they arrived and got settled. 6 hours where he would be driving and unlikely to check his email or bank accounts closely. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I walked into the kitchen. I picked up the phone. I dialed the number for the real estate agent Mrs. Gable had told me to call. "Monica Reed," a crisp voice answered. "Hi, Monica," I said. "My name is Natalie Hartley. You don't know me, but we have a mutual friend, Mrs. Gable. She said you specialize in fast sales." "I do," Monica said. "How fast are we talking?" I looked around my kitchen. I looked at the granite countertops I had picked out. I looked at the height chart for Tyler penciled on the doorframe. "I need to sell my house in 7 days," I said. "Cash only, and it needs to be done before my husband comes back from his vacation." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I can be there in an hour," Monica said. "I'll be waiting," I said. I hung up the phone. I went to the fridge. I took out a bottle of white wine. It was 9 in the morning. I didn't care. I poured a glass. I took a sip. Then I went to the hall closet and pulled out the boxes. It was time to erase him. Monica Reed arrived in a black sedan that looked like it cost more than my husband's annual salary. She stepped out wearing sunglasses and a scarf that fluttered in the wind, looking entirely out of place in our neighborhood of minivans and faded basketball hoops. I watched her from the front window, feeling a strange detachment. This was the woman who was going to help me burn it all down. I opened the door before she could knock. She took off her sunglasses and looked at me with eyes that had seen everything and judged most of it. "Mrs. Hartley," she said, extending a hand. "Mrs. Gable says you are in a hurry." I shook her hand. Her grip was firm, professional. "I have a week," I said. My voice was steady, which surprised me. "I need to close by next Friday. Cash only. No contingencies." Monica walked past me into the foyer. She didn't coo over the crown molding or compliment the hardwood floors like a normal guest. She scanned the structure like a Terminator looking for structural weaknesses. She walked through the living room, the kitchen, the dining room. I followed her, seeing my house through her eyes. I saw the scuff marks on the baseboards that I had been meaning to clean. I saw the throw pillows Blake hated. I saw a museum of a failed marriage. She stopped in the kitchen and turned to me. "Market value is probably $450,000, she said. "But you don't have time for market value. You don't have time for inspections or mortgage approvals or buyers who get cold feet because the feng shui is off." I leaned against the granite island. I knew what was coming. "What can you get me?" I asked. "I have an investor," Monica said. "He buys distressed properties and rentals. He has cash sitting in an account right now. He will offer $375,000, maybe $380 if I push him, $70,000 less than it was worth. That was the price of my freedom. That was the cost of revenge. I did the math in my head. With the mortgage payoff, I would still walk away with a significant chunk, mostly my initial inheritance equity. "Do it," I said. Monica raised an eyebrow. "Just like that? You don't want to talk to your husband?" "My husband is currently at a lake house with his mistress and her parents, spending our savings on boat rentals," I said. "I want the check in my hand before he gets back." Monica's professional mask slipped for a second, replaced by a look of dark amusement. "I like you, Natalie," she said. "I will make the call. Start packing." The universe has a twisted sense of humor. The moment Monica left and I pulled the first moving box out of the closet, I heard a sound that every mother dreads, a low, wet cough coming from upstairs. I dropped the box and ran up the stairs. Tyler was curled up in his bed, his dinosaur blanket pulled up to his chin. His face was flushed a deep, alarming red. I put my hand on his forehead. He was burning up. "Mommy," he whimpered. "My head hurts." My heart sank. "Not now. Please, not now." I had 4 days to pack an entire 4-bedroom house. I had meetings with lawyers. I had to coordinate with the liquidators. I couldn't do any of that with a sick 8-year-old clinging to me. I felt a wave of guilt so strong it almost knocked me over. Was this my fault? Was the stress of my secret seeping into him? They say kids are like sponges. Maybe he sensed that his world was about to explode. I ran to the bathroom and dug through the medicine cabinet. The thermometer read 102 degrees. "I need you to drink some water, baby," I said, lifting his head. I spent the next 6 hours in a nightmare of cool washcloths, children's ibuprofen, and cartoons. Every time I tried to leave the room to pack a box, Tyler would cry out for me. "Don't leave, Mommy," he begged. I sat on the floor next to his bed, holding his hot little hand, looking at the clock. Tick, tick, tick. Every second was a second lost. The walls felt like they were closing in on me. The boxes downstairs remained flat and empty. I looked at my phone. A text from Monica. "Investor is in. Inspection waived. Contracts coming via email." I should have been celebrating. Instead, I was trapped in a dark room, terrified that I was damaging my son, terrified that I wouldn't finish in time, terrified that Blake would come home early and find me surrounded by half-packed boxes and a feverish child. I closed my eyes and prayed to a God I hadn't spoken to in years. Just give me strength. Just get me through this week. By Saturday morning, Tyler's fever had broken, leaving him weak but sleeping peacefully. I left him with a bowl of crackers and the iPad, promising to check on him every 20 minutes. Downstairs, the vultures had arrived. I had hired a estate liquidation company that specialized in rush jobs. They weren't the polite antique dealers who wore white gloves. They were guys in T-shirts who moved fast and paid cash on the spot for bulk items. I led the foreman, a guy named Mike with a clipboard, into the den. This was Blake's sanctuary. It was filled with the things he loved more than us. The 60-inch flat-screen TV, the surround sound system, the leather recliner that cost $2,000, the humidors, the collection of limited edition whiskey bottles, and the golf clubs. I looked at the golf clubs in the corner, custom fitted, titanium drivers. He spent every Sunday with those clubs while I took Tyler to the park alone. "Everything goes," I said. Mike looked around, impressed. "Nice stuff." "You selling the furniture too?" "Everything," I repeated. "The sofas, the dining table, the guest bedroom set, the patio furniture." I watched them work. It was brutal and efficient. They didn't wrap things in bubble wrap. They hauled them out to a box truck waiting in the driveway. I saw Mike pick up the golf bag. He pulled out a driver and whistled. "Give you $200 for the set," he said. "They were worth $2,000. "Sold," I said. I watched him carry the clubs out. I felt a savage satisfaction. Blake loved those clubs. He polished them. He talked about them. Now they were going to be sold at a flea market or a pawn shop. Then came the watch collection. Blake had 5 watches in a display case, a Tag Heuer, a Breitling. He called them investments. Mike looked them over with a jeweler's loupe. "I can give you $3,000 for the lot," he said. "No box, no papers, makes it harder to flip. $3,000. Blake had spent $15,000 on them easily. "Take them," I said. The house was being stripped. The echo in the rooms grew louder with every item that left. It felt like an autopsy. We were carving up the corpse of a marriage and selling the organs for cash. When the truck finally pulled away, the house looked wrong. It looked bigger, colder. I stood in the middle of the empty living room, clutching a stack of cash that Mike had counted out into my hand. $4,000. It was nothing compared to what the items cost. But the money wasn't the point. The point was the emptiness. The point was that when Blake walked through that door, he wouldn't just be homeless, he would be erased. Sunday afternoon. The house was half empty, a chaotic maze of boxes and dust bunnies. I was in the kitchen, packing the good china, my grandmother's china, when my phone pinged with an email notification. Sender, Patricia Wells. Subject, granted. My hands started shaking so bad I almost dropped a teacup. I wiped them on my jeans and opened the email. Attached was a PDF, a court order, emergency ex parte motion for exclusive possession. I opened the document. It was dense with legalese, but the important words jumped out at me. Petitioner Natalie Hartley is granted temporary exclusive possession of the marital residence. Respondent Blake Hartley is hereby restrained from entering the premises. Court finds probable cause regarding dissipation of marital assets. I read it 3 times. Judge Morrison had come through. I legally controlled the house. Blake was technically trespassing if he set foot on the driveway without my permission. But then I scrolled down to the second page. There was a handwritten note in the margin, initialed by the judge. Sale of property. Permitted pending deposit of net proceeds into attorney escrow account. Patricia had done it. She had argued that the house was a wasting asset because of Blake's spending, and since the equity was premarital, I had the right to liquidate to protect the principal. I sat down on the floor, surrounded by bubble wrap. I held the phone to my chest and let out a sob that had been stuck in my throat for days. It was real. I wasn't just a crazy woman selling her husband's stuff. I was a woman with the law on her side. I had the power. I forwarded the PDF to Monica instantly. Then I texted her, "We have the order. Send the closing docs." 10 minutes later, the DocuSign email arrived. I clicked through the prompts. Sign here, initial here. Sign here. With every click, I severed a tie. I sold the roof over our heads. I sold the garden where Tyler took his first steps. I sold the walls that had heard our arguments and our lies. I hit finish. The screen flashed. Congratulations. Your document is complete. I didn't feel congratulations. I felt like I had just cut off my own arm to escape a trap. It hurt, but I was free. We were eating pizza on the floor of the empty living room. Tyler thought it was a camping adventure when my phone vibrated against the hardwood. The screen lit up. Hubby. My stomach dropped. I looked at the time. 7:30. They would be at the lake house by now. They would be settled. I looked at Tyler. He was chewing a slice of pepperoni, looking better but still pale. "Tyler, honey," I said, keeping my voice low, "Daddy is calling." Tyler's eyes lit up. "Daddy? Can I talk to him?" I felt a spike of panic. Tyler didn't know the truth. He didn't know we were moving. He thought we were just cleaning. If he said, "Mommy sold the TV," it was over. I grabbed his hand gently. "Listen to me, Ty. Daddy is on a special fishing trip, remember? And the signal is really bad. We can't tell him about the packing yet. It's a surprise. Like for his birthday." Tyler frowned. "A surprise?" "Yes," I said, improvising desperately. "We are cleaning the whole house to surprise him. So don't mention the boxes, and don't mention that the TV is gone. Okay?" Tyler nodded slowly. "Okay, Mommy." I took a deep breath and swiped answer. "Hey," I said, forcing cheer into my voice. "You made it." "Hey, babe." Blake's voice crackled through the speaker. He sounded relaxed. Too relaxed. "Yeah, we just got here. The drive was brutal, but the cabin is nice." "Cabin?" I knew it was a luxury lodge. "That's great," I said. How are the guys?" "Oh, you know," Blake laughed. "Already arguing about who is cooking dinner. It's going to be a long week." He was lying so easily. It was effortless for him. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him I knew everything. I wanted to tell him I had just sold his recliner for $50. Instead, I said, "Tyler is here. He wants to say hi." I put the phone on speaker and held it out to Tyler, my eyes wide, pleading with him to remember the lie. "Hi, Daddy," Tyler chirped. "Hey, buddy," Blake said. "How is my big man?" "I'm sick," Tyler said. I puked. "Oh, no." Blake sounded genuinely concerned. That was the worst part. He loved Tyler. He just didn't love us enough to not destroy our lives. "Is Mommy taking care of you?" "Yeah," Tyler said. "We are eating pizza on the floor." My breath hitched. On the floor. Because there was no table. "On the floor?" Blake asked. "Camping style?" "Yeah," Tyler said. "Because I stared at Tyler. I shook my head slightly. Because it's fun, Tyler finished. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. That sounds awesome, Bud, Blake said. Well, listen, the signal is cutting out. Be a good boy for Mommy. I'll bring you back a big fish. Okay, bye, Daddy. Love you, Blake said. The line went dead. I took the phone back. My hands were shaking. I looked at the empty spot where the TV used to be. He was going to bring back a fish. I was going to be in Portugal. Monday morning. The movers were scheduled for Tuesday. The house was 80% packed. The living room was a fortress of cardboard boxes labeled kitchen, books, and bedroom. I was taping up a box of winter coats when I heard it. The heavy thud of a car door closing in the driveway. I froze. I wasn't expecting Monica. The estate guys were done. I crept to the window and peeked through the blinds. A beige sedan was parked behind my car. A woman was walking up the path, carrying a Tupperware container. It was Susan, Blake's mother. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded my veins. She couldn't come in. If she stepped 1 foot inside the foyer, she would see the boxes. She would see the empty walls. She would call Blake immediately. She knew about the affair. She supported it. She was probably here to check on me to see if the stupid wife was still oblivious. The doorbell rang. The sound echoed in the empty house like a gunshot. I looked around frantically. There was no way to hide the boxes. They were everywhere. I looked at myself in the hall mirror. No makeup, hair in a messy bun, wearing old sweatpants. I looked like a wreck. Good. Use it. I ran to the door. I opened it just a crack, blocking the view with my body. Susan, I said, sounding breathless, what are you doing here? Susan smiled. It was a tight, pitying smile. Oh, Natalie, dear. Blake told me Tyler was sick. I made some of my chicken noodle soup. I thought I'd drop it off and say hello. She tried to peer past me into the house. That is so sweet of you, I said, not moving an inch. But you can't come in. Susan blinked. Excuse me? It's a stomach bug, I lied. A bad one, very contagious. Tyler has been throwing up all night, and I think I'm starting to get it too. I don't want to get you sick. I leaned against the doorframe, trying to look clammy. Oh, Susan said, taking a half step back. She was a germaphobe. I knew this. I just wanted to help, she said, holding out the soup. I reached out through the crack and took the container. Thank you, Susan, I said. We really appreciate it. I'll tell Blake you stopped by. She lingered. She was looking at the dark hallway behind me. Is everything okay, Natalie? She asked. You look stressed. I am just tired, Susan, I said. Being a single parent for 2 weeks is hard. I let the dig land. She stiffened. Well, I won't keep you. Hope Tyler feels better. She turned and walked back to her car. I watched her go. I didn't close the door until her taillights disappeared around the corner. I looked down at the Tupperware container in my hand. Homemade chicken noodle soup. I walked into the kitchen and dumped it into the sink. I wasn't going to feed my son soup made by a woman who was cheering on the destruction of his family. I threw the container in the trash. Then I went back to packing. My hand hovered over the signature line, the black ink of the pen looking permanent and terrifying against the crisp white paper. The title company office was silent, save for the rhythmic tapping of Monica's fingernail on the mahogany table. This was it, the point of no return. Once I signed this deed, the house wasn't mine. It wasn't Blake's. It belonged to a limited liability company called Blue Horizon Investments. I looked at the settlement statement. The numbers were dizzying. After paying off the remaining mortgage and the expedited closing fees, the net wire amount was $312,000. Is there a problem, Mrs. Hartley? The closing attorney asked. He was a young man with a bad haircut who had no idea he was facilitating the most expensive act of revenge in the county. No, I said, my voice sounding thin. No problem. I thought about Blake sitting on the dock at the lake house, probably nursing a beer, thinking he had a home to return to. I thought about Susan's soup in the trash. I thought about the way Blake had looked at me for the last year, like I was a comfortable shoe he had outgrown but hadn't bothered to throw away yet. I pressed the pen to the paper. I signed my name, Natalie Hartley, for the last time regarding this property. And here, the attorney said, flipping a page, and here. I signed again and again. With every loop of cursive, I felt a physical weight lifting off my chest, replaced by a cold, sharp adrenaline. "Congratulations," the attorney said, closing the folder. "The wire has been initiated. You should see the funds in your account within 2 hours." "Thank you," I said. I stood up. My legs felt like jelly. Monica walked me to the elevator. "You have until 5 o'clock tomorrow to vacate," she said. "The new owner is sending a crew to change the locks at 5:01. "We'll be gone," I said. "Good luck, Natalie," Monica said. She didn't hug me. She wasn't that kind of person. She just nodded, a warrior acknowledging another warrior. "Don't look back." I walked out into the sunlight. I checked my phone. A notification from my bank app. Incoming wire transfer, $312,000. I stared at the words. It was real. I was rich, homeless, and terrified. The echo in the house was deafening. It was Wednesday afternoon. The movers had come and gone, taking the boxes marked for international shipping. The estate liquidators had taken the rest. The house was a shell. I walked through the rooms one last time. The living room where we watched movies. The kitchen where we argued about money. The nursery where I had rocked Tyler to sleep, promising him the world. It all felt like a movie set for a film that had wrapped production. I went to the kitchen island. It was the only surface left. I reached into my bag and pulled out the manila envelope Patricia had given me. Inside were the divorce papers, petition for dissolution of marriage. I placed them in the center of the island. Then I pulled out the other item, the photo album I had stolen from the storage unit. The one with the pictures of Blake and Chloe, the pictures of their family vacations, the pictures of the life he chose over us. I placed it right on top of the legal papers. I opened the album to the page with the photo of them at the lake house last year. They looked so happy, so carefree. I wanted him to see that first. I wanted him to know that I didn't leave because I was crazy. I didn't leave because I was having a midlife crisis. I left because I saw him. I truly saw him. I took a Sharpie from my pocket. On the front of the album, I wrote 3 words. I hope it was worth it. My phone buzzed. It was Blake. A text. "Hey, babe. Just checking in. Mom said you guys have a bug? That sucks. Try to get some rest and don't worry about the cleaning. You always stress too much about the house. It'll be fine. Love you." "You always stress too much." I laughed. It was a dry, ragged sound. He was gaslighting me from 300 miles away. He wanted me to rest so I would be fresh to do his laundry when he got back. I didn't reply. I left the phone on the counter for a second, tempted to smash it, but I needed it for the boarding passes. I picked up my purse. I grabbed Tyler's hand. He was standing by the door, clutching his backpack and his favorite stuffed dinosaur. "Are we going on the adventure now?" he asked. I looked at the empty kitchen. I looked at the divorce papers waiting like a landmine. "Yes, baby," I said. "We're going on the adventure now." I walked out the door. I didn't lock it. I didn't care who got in anymore. Mrs. Gable's silver station wagon was idling at the curb, a cloud of exhaust puffing into the cool air. She had insisted on driving us. "Taxis are unreliable," she had said, "and I want to make sure you actually leave." I buckled Tyler into the back seat. He was still pale, but the excitement of a trip was giving him a second wind. "Where are we going, Mrs. Gable?" Tyler asked. "To the moon, kid," Mrs. Gable rasped, adjusting her rearview mirror, "or as close as you can get with a passport." I slid into the front seat. I felt like a fugitive. Every car that passed looked like Blake's SUV, even though I knew he was 3 states away. "You got the passports?" Mrs. Gable asked, pulling away from the curb. "Yes," I said, patting my bag. "Money?" "Yes." "Did you leave the note?" "Yes," Mrs. Gable nodded. She reached into her center console and pulled out a pack of gum. She offered me a piece. "Nerves," she said. "Chew." I took it. My mouth was dry as sandpaper. We drove through the neighborhood. I watched the houses pass by, the Smiths who had the loud dog, the Millers who threw the block party every July. I was leaving them all. I was disappearing from their lives. By Monday, I would be just a rumor, a cautionary tale they whispered about over wine. "Did you hear about Natalie? She just vanished, took the kid and the money. I heard Blake was cheating. I heard she went crazy." Let them talk. My phone buzzed again. "Blake, sending you some sunshine from the lake. Wish you were here." Attached was a photo, a selfie of him on a boat, wearing sunglasses and holding a beer. In the reflection of his sunglasses, I could see a woman in a bikini sitting across from him. Chloe. He was so sloppy. He was so arrogant. "He just texted me," I said, staring at the screen. "Don't look," Mrs. Gable commanded. "Block the number." "Not yet," I said. "I need to know when he finds out." "You're a glutton for punishment," Mrs. Gable grumbled, but she drove a little faster. The international terminal was a chaotic sea of humanity. People rushing, announcements blaring, the smell of fast food and jet fuel mixing in the air. I held Tyler's hand so tight his fingers were probably turning white. We approached the security checkpoint. The line was long. I scanned the crowd. Every tall man with dark hair looked like Blake. Every woman with blonde hair looked like Susan. I knew it was irrational. I knew they were hundreds of miles away, but my body was in fight-or-flight mode. "Boarding pass and passport," the TSA agent barked. He didn't look up. I handed them over. My hand was shaking. He scanned Tyler's passport, then mine. He paused. He looked at the screen. He frowned. My heart stopped. This was it. There was a flag. Blake had found out. He had called the police. He had reported Tyler kidnapped. "Mrs. Hartley?" the agent asked. "Yes," I squeaked. "You're going to Valencia?" "Yes." "One way?" "Yes. We're moving there for my husband's job." The lie fell out of my mouth before I could stop it. The agent looked at me. He looked at Tyler, who was hugging his dinosaur. "Lucky you," the agent said. "It's raining here." He stamped the boarding pass. "Have a safe flight." I almost collapsed. "Thank you." We walked through the metal detector. I felt lightheaded. I gathered our bags from the belt. "Mommy, are you okay?" Tyler asked. "You look sweaty." "I'm just running a little hot, baby," I said. "Let's go find the gate." We walked to gate 42. We sat down. I checked the time. 1 hour until boarding. I looked at my phone. No new messages. The silence was worse than the notifications. It meant the bomb hadn't gone off yet. It meant the fuse was still burning. I looked at the departure screen. Flight IB 3102 to Madrid. On time. Madrid. Then a connecting flight to Valencia. I was taking my son to a country where we knew no one, where we barely spoke the language. I had rented a furnished apartment online for 2 months, sight unseen. I had no job lined up yet. I had a pile of cash and a broken heart. Was I crazy? Maybe. But staying here was death. Staying here was slowly suffocating while Blake and Chloe laughed at my expense. I looked at Tyler. He was watching the planes take off through the window, his eyes wide with wonder. "Look, Mommy, that one is huge." "Yeah, buddy," I said. "It's taking us to our new life." The plane was full. We were in row 26, cramped and smelling of stale, recycled air. Tyler was in the window seat, already playing with the entertainment screen. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Flight attendants, prepare for departure." The engines roared to life. The plane began to taxi. I closed my eyes. I visualized the map. I visualized the distance between me and that empty house growing with every second. The plane turned onto the runway. The engine screamed. We accelerated. I felt the G-force pushing me back into the seat. It felt like a hand pressing on my chest, holding me down. Then, the lift. The wheels left the ground. We were airborne. I looked out the window. The city spread out below us, a grid of lights and roads. Somewhere down there was the storage unit with the red door. Somewhere down there was Mrs. Gable driving her station wagon back to her quiet life. Somewhere down there was the ghost of Natalie Hartley. I wasn't her anymore. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. I let it fall. I was grieving. I was grieving the marriage I thought I had. I was grieving the innocence I had lost. But as the plane climbed higher, punching through the layer of clouds into the brilliant moonlight above, the grief began to shift. It turned into something else. Relief. Pure, intoxicating relief. I didn't have to check his phone anymore. I didn't have to wonder why he was late. I didn't have to smell his lies on his collar. I was free. I took a deep breath. It was the first full breath I had taken in weeks. "Goodbye, Blake," I whispered to the window. The heat hit me first. We stepped out of the airport in Valencia, and the air was thick, humid, and smelled of dust and citrus. It was nothing like the crisp Ohio autumn we had left behind. My internal clock was shattered. It was morning here, but my body thought it was the middle of the night. Tyler was asleep on my shoulder, a heavy, dead weight. I dragged our suitcases to the taxi stand. My Spanish was rusty, limited to high school classes I had taken 15 years ago. "Hola," I said to the driver, a man with a thick mustache. "Calle de la Paz, por favor." He nodded and threw our bags into the trunk. We drove through the city. The buildings were old, beautiful, with wrought iron balconies and crumbling plaster. Palm trees lined the avenues. It looked like a postcard, but it felt alien. Panic started to creep back in. What was I doing? I was 34 years old. I was alone in a foreign country with an 8-year-old child. I didn't know how to buy groceries here. I didn't know how to call a doctor. I checked my phone. I had turned it off for the flight. I turned it back on. It pinged instantly. 3 missed calls from Monica, 1 voicemail from Mrs. Gable, and a text from Blake. "What do you mean the key doesn't work?" My heart slammed against my ribs. He was home. He wasn't supposed to be back until Sunday. Today was Friday. He had come home early. Why? Had they fought? Had the money run out? I looked at the timestamp. The text was from 2 hours ago. Then another text, 1 hour ago. "Natalie, where are you? The house is empty. Where is my stuff?" And then, 30 minutes ago, "Where is my son?" I stared at the all-caps scream on the screen. The fear was sharp, visceral. But then I looked out the window at the Spanish streets passing by. I looked at the Mediterranean Sea glittering in the distance. He was 4,000 miles away. He couldn't hurt me. He couldn't touch me. I held Tyler tighter. "We're safe," I whispered. "We're safe." But as the taxi pulled up to the old building that was supposed to be our new home, I couldn't shake the feeling that the war wasn't over. It had just changed battlefields. I didn't sleep that first night in Valencia. I sat on the lumpy mattress of our rental apartment, staring at the ceiling fan slicing through the humid air, while my phone buzzed incessantly on the nightstand. I couldn't answer him. Not yet. I needed the full picture. I called Mrs. Gable. It was 3 a.m. in Spain, which meant it was 9 at night back home. She answered on the first ring. "Tell me," I said. I heard the flick of a lighter and a long exhale. "It was glorious, Natalie," Mrs. Gable croaked. "He pulled up right around 5. He was driving fast, swerving into the driveway. He didn't even park straight. He jumped out of the car and ran to the front door. I closed my eyes, visualizing it. Blake, in his boat shoes and designer sunglasses, confronting a door that refused to yield. He tried the key for 5 minutes. Mrs. Gable continued. He was jiggling it, kicking the wood. Then he started looking in the windows. I saw him cup his hands against the glass. He froze. He just froze solid. "Because the house was empty," I whispered. "Because it was a tomb," she corrected. Then he started pacing. He was on the phone, screaming at someone. Probably you. Then he did something stupid. My stomach tightened. What did he do? He picked up a landscaping rock, the big one by the hydrangeas, and he smashed the window of the side door. He broke in? He tried, Mrs. Gable said. But the alarm system, the one you transferred to the new owner yesterday, it went off, loudest thing I have ever heard. And because the new owner is a property management firm, the police were automatic. I let out a breath. The police. 2 cruisers, Mrs. Gable said with distinct satisfaction. They pulled up with lights flashing. Blake was halfway through the broken window, looking like a common burglar. Mrs. Gable had stayed on the line while I paced the small Spanish apartment. She was narrating the police interaction like it was a baseball game. They have him in handcuffs, she reported. He is yelling. I can hear him from here. What is he saying? I asked. He is doing that thing he does, Mrs. Gable said, the charm offensive. I knew that tone. It was the tone he used to get out of speeding tickets, the tone he used to explain why he missed my birthday. I could imagine him flashing that winning smile at the officers, explaining that this was all a big misunderstanding, that his wife was just having a little episode and had changed the locks by mistake. He would paint me as the hysterical woman and himself as the patient, suffering husband. Mrs. Gable went silent for a moment. The officer is shaking his head, she said. He is holding a piece of paper. It looks like the deed transfer. Or the restraining order. The order. Patricia must have filed it with the local precinct the moment the closing was finalized. They are putting him in the back of the cruiser, Mrs. Gable said. He isn't smiling anymore. He looks small. He wasn't arrested for burglary, I found out later. The new owners declined to press charges if he agreed to leave the premises immediately and pay for the window, but they escorted him off the property. They told him he had no legal right to be there. He stood on the sidewalk, a man with a suitcase and a mistress waiting in the car, looking at the house that wasn't his anymore. He got in the car with the girl, Mrs. Gable said. She was driving. She looked furious. They peeled out. I hung up the phone. I looked at Tyler, sleeping soundly in a strange bed in a strange country. Blake was homeless. He was humiliated. But the phone on the nightstand was still vibrating. He wasn't done. I waited until the next morning to answer. I wanted to be awake. I wanted to be caffeinated. I wanted the sun to be shining so I wouldn't feel the darkness of his influence. I sat on the small balcony overlooking the narrow street. The smell of baking bread drifted up from the bakery below. I swiped answer. Natalie. Blake's voice was smooth, terrifyingly calm. Thank God you picked up. I didn't say anything. I just listened to his breathing. Honey, he said, and the endearment made my skin crawl. We need to talk. You are obviously having some kind of breakdown. I get it. The stress of the last year, me working so hard, it's been a lot on you. He was rewriting reality in real time. He was building a narrative where he was the victim and I was the mentally unstable wife. I forgive you, Natalie, he said. I almost dropped the phone. He forgave me. I spoke for the first time. Where are you sleeping, Blake? There was a pause, a crack in the facade. We are at a hotel, he said tightly, because you sold our house. But we can fix this. I've already talked to a lawyer. We can claim you were mentally incapacitated when you signed those papers. We can get the house back. We can get the money back. You just need to come home. We? I asked. Who is we? He hesitated. Me and my parents. We are all worried about you. He was still lying. He wouldn't admit Chloe was there. He wouldn't admit he had dragged his mistress into the wreckage of our marriage. I went to the storage unit, Blake. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. It was the sound of a vacuum sealing shut. I went to Unit 4B, I continued, my voice steady and cold. I saw the red door. I saw the photos. I saw the bed. I read the notes on the iPad. Natalie, he stammered. That isn't what it looks like. That is a workspace. I was I read the receipt for the necklace, Blake. I saw the reservation for the lodge. I know about the Monroes. I know you paid their credit card debt with our savings." He stopped breathing. The charm was gone. The toxic positivity evaporated, replaced by pure, naked panic. "You can't prove any of that," he hissed. "I have copies," I said. "I have everything. And so does my lawyer, and so does the judge who granted me the right to sell the house." "You ruined my life," he screamed. The sound was distorted, ugly. I heard a woman's voice in the background asking what was happening. "You stole my house. You stole my son." "I didn't steal anything," I said. "I just liquidated my assets. I am coming for you," he shouted. "I will find you." "You can try," I said, "but you don't have a passport." I had found his expired passport in the desk drawer. I knew he hadn't renewed it. I hung up. Then I blocked the number. The next week was a blur of logistics and settling in, punctuated by updates from back home. Patricia Wells was my lifeline, feeding me the details of Blake's destruction. It happened fast. The dominoes I had set up fell with satisfying precision. First, the Mistress. Patricia emailed me on Tuesday. "Update on the co-respondent," she wrote. "Chloe Monroe has returned to her parents' home. Alone. Apparently, a 38-year-old man with no house, no car, and a frozen bank account wasn't quite as attractive as the successful executive she thought she was dating. According to the grapevine, which meant Mrs. Gable, there had been a screaming match in the hotel parking lot. Chloe had yelled that she didn't sign up to be a nursemaid to a broke loser. She left him at the Motel 6. Then, the job. I had been driving the luxury SUV that was leased in his company's name. I had left it at the airport in the long-term parking lot, but I had mailed the keys to his HR department with a note explaining that I could no longer be responsible for the vehicle as we were divorcing due to his infidelity with a subordinate. I didn't mention Chloe's name. I didn't have to. The office rumors did the rest. Patricia told me he was fired on Thursday. Code of conduct violation. Misuse of company funds. Turns out he had been charging some of those client dinners to the corporate card. He was in a motel room, unemployed, single, and facing a mountain of debt. I sat in a cafe in Valencia, reading Patricia's email on my phone. I tried to feel guilty. I tried to find that part of me that had loved him for 14 years. But all I felt was the warm Spanish sun on my face and the taste of a café con leche. Spain wasn't easy. I want to be clear about that. It wasn't a magical vacation where all my problems vanished. The language barrier was a wall I hit every day. I cried in a grocery store because I couldn't find the right kind of milk for Tyler. I got lost on the metro and ended up in a suburb I couldn't pronounce. I missed my friends. I missed Target. I missed the ease of knowing how the world worked. But Tyler was thriving. He started at an international school. The resilience of children is a terrifying and beautiful thing. Within 2 weeks, he had a best friend named Mateo. They didn't speak the same language, but they both spoke dinosaur. One afternoon, I picked him up from school. He was running toward me, grinning, waving a drawing of a T-Rex. "Mommy," he yelled. Mateo says hola means hello. I hugged him. I buried my face in his hair. He smelled like sweat and crayons and happiness. He didn't ask about his dad anymore. He didn't ask about the house. He was here, in the moment. That night, I sat on the balcony. I had my laptop open. I was updating my design portfolio, changing my location from Ohio to global. I looked at the bank account. The money was safe. I had enough to live for 5 years if I was careful, but I didn't want to just survive. I wanted to build. I sent out 5 proposals to remote clients. I was starting over, not as a wife, not as a victim, but as Natalie. 3 weeks after we arrived, a forwarded envelope arrived from Patricia's office. Inside was a letter from Blake. Patricia had attached a sticky note. "Read at your own risk. He is representing himself now." I held the envelope. It felt light. I walked to the kitchen sink. I lit a match. I held it to the corner of the envelope. but I blew it out. I needed to know. I needed to see the final gasp of the man I had married. I tore it open. It was handwritten on lined yellow paper. Dear Natalie, I hope you are happy. I hope destroying our family gave you the satisfaction you wanted. I am staying at my parents' house. I am sleeping in my childhood bedroom. It is humiliating, but I am sure you enjoy knowing that. I want you to know that I forgive you for your reaction. I know you were hurt. I know I made mistakes. But what you did was disproportionate. You didn't just leave me, you erased me. I am willing to put this behind us. If you come back, we can work out a visitation schedule. I won't press charges for the theft of the household items. I just want to see my son. You need help, Natalie. You are not well. Please, for Tyler's sake, come home. Love, Blake. I stared at the words. I forgive you. You are not well. He hadn't learned a thing. He was still the hero of his own story. He was still the benevolent king, graciously offering amnesty to the crazy woman who had wronged him. He didn't mention Chloe. He didn't mention the lies. He didn't mention the years of neglect. He was a black hole. And if I went back, even for a visit, he would swallow me whole. I didn't burn the letter. That would have been too dramatic. I crumpled it up. I tossed it into the trash can, right on top of the coffee grounds and eggshells. "Mommy!" Tyler called from the living room. "Can we go to the park?" I looked at the trash can. Then I looked at my son. "Yes," I said. "Let's go." I walked out of the apartment and locked the door behind me. I didn't look back. Update. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized in absentia. Patricia Wells called it a masterpiece of default judgment. Blake never showed up to the final hearing. He had no lawyer, no money to travel, and apparently no fight left. The judge awarded me full custody, citing his instability and lack of suitable housing. I am sitting in a plaza in Valencia, drinking sangria. The sun is setting, casting long, golden shadows across the cobblestones. My phone buzzes. It is a notification from Zillow. I still have alerts set up for our old neighborhood. Just listed, 4-bed, 3-bath in Cedar Creek, fully renovated. I click on the link. It is our house. The investors have painted the walls a trendy gray. They have replaced the carpets. They have staged it with generic modern furniture. It looks beautiful. It looks like a stranger's house. The listing price is $525,000. I smile. The investors made a profit. Good for them. I scroll down to the sales history. Sold 3 months ago. Price $375,000. I close the app. Tyler runs up to my table. He is speaking rapid-fire Spanish to a little girl with pigtails. He looks taller. He looks tan. He looks free. I am not the woman who checked pockets anymore. I am not the woman who made excuses. I am Natalie Carvalho. I dropped the Hartley. I took back my maiden name. I take a sip of my drink. The ice clinks against the glass. It was the hardest thing I ever did. I lost friends. I lost my home. I lost my sense of security. But looking at my son laughing under the orange trees, I know one thing for sure. It was worth every single penny. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.